The alarm bells rang through the halls of Kepler Station for the third time that week. Students and teachers rushed out of their rooms, looking around in confusion. They all knew what the sound meant. Cadet 13 had done something again. In the chemistry lab on level 7, smoke poured out from under the door. The automatic fire system had kicked in, spraying white foam everywhere. Through the chaos, a figure emerged from the lab, covered in green slime and grinning widely. His skin was clear like glass and it glowed with excitement. This was Cadet 13, though nobody could say his real name. His people, the Zephyrians, had names that sounded like music mixed with wind chimes. The teachers just called him 13. 13 wiped the green goo from his face and looked at the mess behind him. The lab looked like a battlefield. Tables were overturned, equipment was scattered across the floor, and the walls had strange burn marks. He had been trying to make a better fuel for spaceships. The experiment had worked, sort of. It had worked. Too well? Professor Kane, a tall man with gray hair, pushed through the crowd of students. His face was red with anger. Cadet 13, what have you done now? 13's grin got even bigger. I improved the fuel mixture by 40%, Professor. Look at those burn patterns on the wall. The energy output was incredible. You nearly blew up the entire level, Professor Kane shouted. This is the third lab accident this month, the second explosion this week. And yesterday you somehow managed to turn the gravity off in the dining hall. That was an accident, 13 said, still smiling. I was just trying to see how the gravity plates worked. How was I supposed to know they were connected to the main system? The other students backed away from 13. They had learned to stay far from him when he got that look in his eyes. The look that meant he was thinking of his next experiment. The look that meant trouble was coming. 13 was not like other Zephyrians. His people were careful and slow to act. They thought about things for days before making decisions. They were afraid of making mistakes, afraid of getting hurt, afraid of causing problems. But not 13. He had been born without fear, and it showed in everything he did. At his first academy on Centauri Prime, he had taken apart a training ship to see how it worked. He put it back together, but he had improved the engine. When the ship took off for a test flight, it went 3 times faster than it should have. The pilot barely managed to land it safely. 13 was expelled the next day. At his second academy, on Titan Base, he had challenged the biggest, strongest student to a fight. The student was a Cronin warrior, twice 13's size and covered in armor-like skin. 13 had no chance of winning, but he fought anyway. He lost badly, but he got back up every time he was knocked down. The fight lasted an hour. The Cronin was so impressed that he asked to be 13's friend. The teachers were not impressed. They expelled 13 for starting an unauthorized combat match. At his third academy on Mars Colony, 13 had tried to prove that the school's defense shields were not strong enough. He hacked into the system and turned them off during a meteor shower. Small rocks started hitting the station. No one was hurt, but the teachers were furious. Another expulsion. Now he was at Kepler Station, the Galactic Naval Academy. This was his last chance. If he got expelled from here, no other school would take him. His own people had given up on him. They thought he was broken, a Zephyrian who could not learn to be careful. Commander Vex walked through the crowd, his forearms crossed over his chest. He was a Centaurian, and like most of his people, he was calm and logical. He had been watching 13 for months, trying to understand what made him so different. Cadet 13, Commander Vex said in his deep voice. Come with me. 13 followed the commander through the halls of the station. Other students moved out of their way. Everyone knew Commander Vex. He was fair but strict. He did not get angry easily, but when he did, it was terrifying. They walked to the commander's office, a small room filled with books and star charts. Commander Vex sat behind his desk and looked at 13 for a long moment. Sit down, Cadet, he said. 13 sat, but he could not sit still. He bounced his leg and looked around the room. There were so many interesting things to examine. He wondered how the star charts were made. He wondered if he could improve the lighting system. He wondered what would happen if he mixed the coffee on the commander's desk with some of the chemicals from the lab. Cadet 13, Commander Vex said, interrupting his thoughts. Do you know why you are here? Because I blew up the lab? 13 asked. No. Do you know why you are at this academy? 13 thought about it. Because the other schools expelled me? No. Commander Vex leaned forward. You are here because you have potential. You are brilliant. Your mind works in ways that amaze even our best teachers. But you are also dangerous. I do not mean to be dangerous, 13 said. I just want to learn things. I want to see how things work. I want to make them better. I know, Commander Vex said. But your curiosity is going to get someone killed. Maybe yourself. Maybe someone else. We cannot let that happen. 13's glow dimmed a little. He had heard this speech before at the other schools. They were going to expel him. He would have to go back to his home planet and spend his life doing safe, boring work like other Zephyrians. However, Commander Vex continued, I am not giving up on you yet, but things must change. You cannot continue to work alone. You need someone to watch you, someone to help you think before you act. You are giving me a babysitter? 13 asked. I am giving you a roommate, Commander Vex said. Someone who might be able to help you control your impulses. Someone who might teach you that being fearless and being reckless are not the same thing. 13 did not like this idea. He had always worked alone. Other students were too slow, too careful, too boring. They were afraid of the interesting experiments, afraid of the dangerous ideas, afraid of real discovery. Who is it? 13 asked. A new student, a human. His name is Jake Miller. He will arrive tomorrow. 13 had heard about humans. They were a new species in the galaxy, just starting to join the other worlds. Some people said they were weak. Others said they were dangerous. 13 was curious about them. What if I do not want a roommate? 13 asked. Commander Vex's 4 eyes looked directly at him. Then you will be on the next transport ship home. This is your choice, Cadet. Learn to work with others or leave. 13 thought about it. Going home meant giving up on his dreams. It meant spending his life being careful and boring like other Zephyrians. It meant never getting to explore the galaxy, never getting to learn about all the amazing things out there among the stars. Fine, he said. I will try it. Good, Commander Vex said. But Cadet, understand this. If you get this human hurt because of your recklessness, I will personally put you on a ship home, and I will make sure no other academy in the galaxy ever accepts you again. 13 nodded. He understood. This was really his last chance. As he walked back to his room, 13 thought about his new roommate, a human named Jake Miller. He wondered what humans were like. Were they as boring as most other species? Were they afraid of everything like the Centaurians? Were they aggressive like the Cronins? He would find out tomorrow, and maybe if this human was interesting enough, 13 would show him some of his experiments. Maybe they could work together on something amazing. 13 smiled as he reached his door. Tomorrow was going to be very interesting. The transport ship arrived at Kepler Station early in the morning. 13 had been awake all night working on a new project. He had taken apart his alarm clock to see if he could make it run backwards. The pieces were scattered across his desk along with tools he had borrowed from the engineering lab without permission. He heard footsteps in the hallway outside his room, heavy boots walking with purpose, not the quick, nervous steps of most students. These sounded different, confident. 13's skin began to glow with curiosity. The door opened and a young man walked in. He was tall with brown hair and dark eyes. He wore simple clothes and carried only one bag. This had to be Jake Miller, the human. 13 had expected someone more interesting looking. Humans looked almost exactly like several other species in the galaxy. Pretty boring, he thought. Jake stopped in the doorway and looked around the room. 13 was hanging upside down from the ceiling, his feet hooked around a pipe. Sparks were flying from a device in his hands. The room's lights were flashing, on and off. Small pieces of metal were floating in the air because 13 had been experimenting with the gravity again. You must be Jake. 13 said, not bothering to turn right side up. I am improving our room. The gravity system here is very old. I can make it much better. Jake walked over to the wall and pressed a button. The sparks stopped. The lights stopped flashing. The floating metal pieces fell to the floor. 13 dropped down from the ceiling, landing gracefully on his feet. Hi, 13, Jake said, setting his bag on the empty bed. Maybe we should talk about changes before you accidentally break something important. 13 stared at the human. Jake had not seemed surprised by the chaos. He had not yelled or run away like most people did. He had just calmly fixed the problem and started unpacking his things. You are not afraid, 13 said. It was not a question. Jake shrugged. Should I be? This was not the answer 13 had expected. Everyone was afraid of something. The Centaurians were afraid of making mistakes. The Cronans were afraid of looking weak. The Zephyrians were afraid of everything. But this human seemed completely calm. Most people are afraid when they meet me, 13 said. They think I will get them in trouble or hurt them or blow something up. Will you? Jake asked, still unpacking. 13 thought about it. Probably not on purpose. Jake laughed. It was a nice sound, not mean or nervous like most people's laughs when they talked to 13. Well, that is good enough for me. Over the next few days, Jake settled into life at the academy. He went to classes, studied his books, and talked with other students. But he was different from everyone else. He seemed to know things that were not in the textbooks. He could fix broken equipment without reading the manual. He could find his way around the station like he had lived there for years. The other students were curious about him. Humans were new to the galaxy, and most people had never met one before. Jake answered their questions politely but did not say much about himself. 13 noticed that Jake never seemed to worry about anything. Not about tests, not about the strict teachers, not about fitting in with the other students. 13 tried to test Jake in small ways. He left some of his experiments lying around the room to see if Jake would be curious. Jake looked at them but did not touch anything without asking first. 13 made strange noises at night to see if Jake would be scared. Jake just told him to keep it down because he was trying to sleep. The real test came during their first week together. 13 had been working on a project for his engineering class. He was supposed to build a simple robot that could move around and pick up objects. But simple was boring. 13 had added extra parts and made changes to the design. His robot was faster and stronger than it was supposed to be. It was also completely out of control. The robot zipped around their room, knocking things over and making terrible noises. Its metal arm swung wildly, trying to grab everything in sight. It had already broken a lamp and was now trying to eat Jake's books. 13, Jake said calmly, watching the robot tear apart his homework. How do you turn this thing off? I am not sure, 13 admitted. I changed the programming, but I think I made a mistake. The robot suddenly turned toward them, its red eyes glowing. It made a sound like a dying animal and charged straight at Jake. Most people would have run or screamed. Jake just stepped to the side and grabbed a metal ruler from 13's desk. As the robot rushed past him, Jake stuck the ruler between its wheels. The robot flipped over and crashed into the wall. Sparks flew from its circuits, and it stopped. Moving, nice robot, Jake said, handing the ruler back to 13. Maybe next time we can add an off switch. 13 stared at him. Jake had not been afraid of the robot. He had not gotten angry about his destroyed books. He had just solved the problem and moved on. How did you know to do that? 13 asked. I grew up on a mining colony, Jake said. We had robots like that for moving rocks. They break down a lot. You learn to fix them quick or you do not eat. This was the first time Jake had talked about his past. 13 wanted to know more. What was it like? The mining colony? Jake sat on his bed and looked out the window at the stars. Hard, dangerous. We were always one broken machine away from disaster. But it taught me things. How to stay calm when everything goes wrong. How to fix problems instead of just worrying about them. Were you afraid? 13 asked. Jake was quiet for a moment. All the time. Fear keeps you alive out there. but you cannot let it stop you from doing what needs to be done. 13 did not understand this. He had never been afraid of anything. Fear seemed like a weakness to him, but Jake talked about it like it was useful. I do not get scared, 13 said. My people think something is wrong with me because of it. Maybe, Jake said. Or maybe you just have not found the right thing to be afraid of yet. The next day, they had their first class together. It was called survival training, and it was taught by Commander Vex himself. The students had to work in teams to solve problems. They were given broken equipment and told to fix it. They had to navigate through dark tunnels. They had to work together to lift heavy objects. 13 was paired with Jake. He expected the human to slow him down. Most people could not keep up with 13's quick thinking and fast movements. But Jake was different. He seemed to understand what 13 was trying to do before 13 even explained it. When they had to fix a broken communications device, 13 took it apart quickly while Jake found the replacement parts they needed. When they had to navigate through a maze in the dark, 13 used his natural ability to see in low light while Jake somehow knew which direction to go. How do you do that? 13 asked as they easily beat the other teams to the finish line. Do what? Jake asked. You always know what to do. You are never confused or lost. Jake smiled. I pay attention, I watch, I listen. Most problems have simple solutions if you just think about them. 13 had never thought about thinking. He just did things. If something interested him, he explored it. If he had an idea, he tried it. Planning was for slow, boring people, but watching Jake work was fascinating. The human did not rush into things like 13 did. He looked at problems from different angles. He asked questions. He made sure he understood what he was doing before he started, and it worked. Jake solved problems faster than most students, even though he took more time to think about them first. That night, 13 lay in his bed and thought about his new roommate. Jake was not what he had expected. He was not boring or slow or afraid. He was something else entirely, something 13 had never encountered before. For the first time in his life, 13 was starting to understand that maybe there were things he could learn from other people. Maybe being fearless was not the same as being smart. Maybe there was more to being brave than just doing dangerous things. Maybe this human could teach him something important. 3 weeks passed, and 13 began to notice strange things about his human roommate. Jake never seemed to panic, even when everything went wrong. During a fire drill, when alarms were screaming and students were running everywhere, Jake had walked calmly to the exit. When their physics teacher had given them an impossible test, Jake had just started working through the problems one by one. But the strangest thing was how Jake dealt with 13's experiments. Most people either tried to stop him or stayed far away. Jake did neither. Instead, he would watch quietly and sometimes ask questions. Why are you mixing those two chemicals? Jake asked one evening as 13 worked at his desk. To see what happens, 13 replied, adding a drop of blue liquid to a tube of yellow powder. What do you think will happen? Jake asked. 13 paused. No one had ever asked him that before. They usually just told him to stop. I think it might glow, or maybe explode, or both. Have you looked up what those chemicals do when they mix? That would spoil the surprise, 13 said. Jake walked over to his computer and typed something. After a few seconds, he said, according to this, those two chemicals make a gas that can make people sick. Maybe we should do this experiment in the lab where there is better airflow. 13 looked at the chemicals in his hand. He had not thought about the gas being dangerous to breathe. He had just wanted to see what would happen. Oh, he said quietly. Come on, Jake said, picking up the chemicals. Let us go to the lab. I want to see what happens too. This was how Jake worked. He did not try to stop 13 from experimenting. Instead, he helped make the experiments safer. He would suggest better places to work. He would bring safety equipment. He would look up information that 13 had not thought to check. At first, 13 was annoyed by this. Jake was slowing him down, making him think about boring things like safety and planning. But slowly, 13 began to see that Jake's way led to better results. When they planned experiments carefully, they worked better. When they used proper safety equipment, they could try more dangerous things without getting in trouble. The other students began to notice the change too. 13 was still doing crazy experiments, but now they actually worked. His projects for class were brilliant instead of just chaotic. His test scores improved because Jake helped him study properly. But what bothered 13 most was something he could not quite understand. Jake never seemed afraid of anything, but he also never did anything stupid. 13 had always thought that not being afraid meant doing whatever you wanted. But Jake seemed to have a different kind of fearlessness. The difference became clear during their combat training class. All students had to learn basic fighting skills in case they ever had to defend their ships. The instructor was a Cronin warrior named Sergeant Rock. He was huge, covered in natural armor, and had a voice like thunder. Sergeant Rock paired students up for sparring matches. When he saw 13 and Jake together, he smiled with all his sharp teeth. The fearless Zephyrian and the new human. This should be interesting. 13 grinned and bounced on his feet. He loved fighting. Pain did not scare him, and losing did not bother him. He just enjoyed the challenge. Jake stood quietly watching 13 and studying his movements. He did not look excited or nervous. He just looked ready. "Begin!" Sergeant Rock shouted. 13 rushed forward immediately, throwing punches and kicks as fast as he could. This was his usual strategy. Attack quickly and never stop moving. It usually worked because his opponents got confused or tired. But Jake was not confused. He moved just enough to avoid 13's attacks, never wasting energy on big movements. When 13 punched, Jake stepped aside. When 13 kicked, Jake was not there anymore. After 2 minutes, 13 was breathing hard and getting frustrated. He had not hit Jake even once. Jake looked like he had just been taking a walk. "Stand still," 13 shouted, throwing a wild punch. Jake caught 13's wrist and used his momentum to spin him around. Before 13 knew what was happening, he was on the ground with Jake's knee gently pressed against his back. "Good match," Jake said, helping 13 up. 13 stared at him. "How did you do that? You did not even look like you were trying." "I was not trying to beat you," Jake said. "I was just trying not to get hit." "That is the same thing," 13 said. "No, it is not." Jake picked up his water bottle and took a drink. "If I had been trying to beat you, I would have attacked. I would have tried to hurt you. Instead, I just waited for you to make a mistake." 13 thought about this. He had made lots of mistakes during the fight. He had punched at empty air. He had left himself open to counterattacks. He had wasted energy on moves that did not work. "Why did you not attack me?" 13 asked. "Because I did not need to," Jake said. "You were doing all the work for me." That night, 13 could not sleep. He kept thinking about the fight and about the way Jake approached problems. Jake never seemed to rush into anything. He watched, he waited, he thought, and then he acted. But when he did act, it was always at exactly the right moment. The next day, they had a navigation class. Students had to plot courses through asteroid fields using computer simulations. It was one of the hardest classes at the academy because there were so many things to think about at once. Speed, fuel, gravity, moving obstacles, and time limits. 13 usually attacked these problems like he attacked everything else. He would pick a direction and go as fast as possible, making quick decisions and hoping for the best. Sometimes it worked, but usually he crashed into asteroids or ran out of fuel. This time he decided to try Jake's approach. He sat quietly and studied the asteroid field for a full minute before making any moves. He looked for patterns in how the asteroids moved. He calculated how much fuel different routes would need. He thought about what could go wrong. Then he started flying. But instead of going as fast as possible, he matched his speed to the movement of the asteroids. Instead of forcing his way through tight spaces, he waited for openings to appear. Instead of making quick decisions, he planned 3 moves ahead. It worked. For the first time ever, 13 completed the navigation exercise without crashing. He even finished with extra fuel left over. Excellent work, Cadet 13, Professor Mills said, looking at his results. Your approach today was much more mature. After class, Jake walked up to him. Nice flying, he said. I tried to think like you, 13 said. It was harder than just doing things, but it worked better. Thinking is not harder than doing, Jake said. It is just different, and it makes the doing part easier. Over the following weeks, 13 began to change his approach to everything. He still loved experimenting and taking risks, but now he planned his risks carefully. He still moved fast, but he thought fast too. He still pushed boundaries, but he understood what the boundaries were for. The teachers noticed the change. Commander Vex called 13 to his office again, but this time he was smiling. Your grades have improved dramatically, the commander said. Your experiments are successful instead of just spectacular. Your projects are innovative but also practical. What changed? 13 thought about the question. What had changed was not that he had become more afraid. He was still not scared of danger or failure or pain. What had changed was that he had learned to be afraid of something else. I learned to be afraid of wasting opportunities, he said finally. Jake taught me that being smart about risks lets you take bigger risks safely. Commander Vex nodded slowly. And what do you think of your human roommate? 13 was quiet for a moment. I think humans are more dangerous than anyone realizes. Dangerous how? They are not afraid of the right things, but they are also not stupid about anything. That makes them very hard to predict, and very hard to stop. Commander Vex leaned back in his chair. Interesting observation. What makes you think that? Jake never gets scared of things that scare other people, 13 explained. But he also never does anything without thinking about it first. He is like someone who can walk through fire because he knows exactly how hot it is and how long he can stay. That night, 13 lay in his bed thinking about fear and courage, and the strange human who had become his friend. He was beginning to understand that there were different kinds of bravery. His kind was like a bright flame that burned everything around it. Jake's kind was like a laser that could cut through anything because it was focused and controlled. For the first time in his life, 13 was scared. Not of getting hurt or getting in trouble, but of the possibility that he might never be as brave as Jake Miller. The announcement came during breakfast on a Tuesday morning. Commander Vex stood at the front of the dining hall, his forearms folded behind his back. The room fell silent as all the students looked up from their meals. Today begins the Titan run, he said, his deep voice carrying across the hall. This is the most important test you will face at this academy. Each of you will pilot a single ship through the gravity field of Titan 7. You must navigate between its moons while being hunted by defense drones. You have 4 hours to complete the course. 13 felt his skin begin to glow with excitement. He had been waiting for this test all year. The Titan run was legendary. It was the test that separated real pilots from the ones who just knew how to fly in straight lines. The rules are simple, Commander Vex continued. Stay alive. Reach the finish point. Do not get caught by the drones. If your ship is disabled, you will be rescued, but you will fail the test. If you fail this test, you will not graduate from this academy. Jake sat quietly beside 13, eating his breakfast like nothing important was happening. This annoyed 13 a little. How could Jake be so calm about something this big? Are you not excited? 13 whispered. Sure, Jake said, taking another bite of his food, but being excited will not help me fly better. After breakfast, they went to the hangar where the test ships waited. These were small, fast fighters designed for exactly this kind of challenge. They had good engines, basic weapons, and enough armor to survive a few hits from the defense drones. 13 walked around his ship checking everything twice. The engines looked good, the weapons were charged, the navigation system was working. But as he looked at the ship, he started thinking about improvements he could make. Maybe he could boost the engine power, maybe he could modify the weapons. Maybe he could reprogram the navigation computer. He was reaching for his tools when Jake appeared beside him. Planning to modify your ship? Jake asked. Just a few small improvements, 13 said. I could increase the engine output by 20%. It would make the ship much faster. And what would that do to the fuel consumption? Jake asked. 13 paused. He had not thought about that. More power meant more fuel used. The test lasted 4 hours. If he used too much fuel early on, he might not have enough to finish. Maybe I should not change anything, 13 said slowly. Maybe, Jake agreed. Sometimes the engineers who built these ships knew what they were doing. They climbed into their cockpits and ran through the pre-flight checks. 13 had done this hundreds of times in simulation, but this felt different. This was real. His hands moved over the controls automatically, but his mind was racing with possibilities. The gravity field around Titan 7 was tricky. The planet had 6 moons, all moving in different orbits. Their gravity pulled ships in unexpected directions. Add the defense drones to that, and the course became a deadly puzzle that changed every second. All pilots prepare for launch, came the voice from Control Tower. 13 gripped his controls and felt his heart beating fast. This was what he lived for. The moment when everything depended on skill and reflexes and the willingness to take risks. Launch when ready, Control Tower said. 13 hit his engines and shot out of the hangar like a bullet. His ship screamed toward Titan 7, accelerating as fast as the engines could push it. This was his plan. Get there first, move fast, confuse the drones with speed and unpredictable movements. Behind him, he saw Jake's ship leaving the hangar much more slowly. Jake was not racing toward the planet. He was taking his time, studying the course layout on his scanner. Come on, Jake, 13 called over the radio. You are going to fall behind. I will catch up, Jake replied calmly. 13 reached the first checkpoint ahead of everyone else. The defense drones appeared immediately, black shapes moving fast against the stars. They were programmed to hunt the test ships using advanced tracking systems and smart weapons. 13 threw his ship into a wild spin, dodging the first wave of drone attacks. Laser beams flashed past his cockpit. His ship shook as near misses rattled the hull, but he was grinning. This was fun. He twisted between 2 moons, using their gravity to slingshot around them faster than the drones expected. His plan was working. The drones could not keep up with his crazy flying, but as he moved deeper into the course, problems started. His fuel gauge was dropping faster than he had planned. All those high-speed turns and engine bursts were using more power than he had calculated. And the drones were learning his patterns. They were starting to predict where he would go next. Meanwhile, Jake had entered the course and was moving through it like he was dancing. His ship flowed between the obstacles, never making sharp turns or sudden moves. He used the gravity fields to help him instead of fighting against them. The drones chased him, but they could never quite catch him. 13 watched Jake's progress on his scanner and felt confused. Jake was moving slower than 13, but he was also moving more efficiently. He was not wasting fuel on unnecessary maneuvers. He was not fighting the course. He was working with it. At the halfway point, disaster struck for 13. He had been pushing his engines too hard for too long. Warning lights flashed on his control panel. His fuel was running low, and his engines were overheating. He tried to slow down and conserve power, but the drones sensed his weakness immediately. They closed in from all sides, their weapons charging for a killing shot. 13 looked at his scanner and realized he was in serious trouble. He had enough fuel to reach the finish line, but only if he could avoid the drones for the next 2 hours. And his damaged engines would not let him fly fast enough to escape them. For the first time in his life, 13 felt real fear. Not fear of getting hurt or even fear of dying, fear of failing, fear of disappointing everyone who had believed in him, fear that his recklessness had finally caught up with him. Jake, he called over the radio. I think I messed up. Jake's voice came back immediately, calm and steady. What is your situation? Low fuel, overheated engines, and 6 drones about to turn me into space dust, 13 said. Send me your position, Jake said. 13 transmitted his coordinates and watched his scanner. Jake was still 20 minutes away, moving through the course at his careful, measured pace. The drones would finish 13 long before Jake could reach him. You cannot help me, 13 said. You will fail the test if you try. The test does not matter, Jake said simply. People matter. 13 felt something strange happen inside his chest. No one had ever said anything like that to him before. No one had ever thought he was more important than grades or rules or success. Jake, no, 13 said. You worked too hard to get here. Do not throw it away from me. But Jake was already changing course, pushing his engines harder than he had all day. He was abandoning his careful, efficient flight plan and racing to reach 13 before the drones could attack. Just stay alive for 10 more minutes, Jake said. I am coming. 13 looked at the drones closing in around him and felt something he had never experienced before. Someone was risking everything to save him. Someone thought he was worth saving, even when he had made stupid mistakes. For the first time in his life, 13 understood what it meant to be truly afraid. He was not afraid of the drones or of dying. He was afraid of what would happen to Jake if this rescue mission failed. He was afraid that his new friend would sacrifice his dreams for someone who did not deserve it. And that fear changed everything. Instead of giving up or making desperate moves, 13 started thinking. He looked at his situation like a puzzle, to be solved instead of a fight to be won. He still had some fuel left. His engines were damaged but still working. The drones were close, but they had to be careful not to destroy his ship completely, because they were programmed to capture, not kill. Maybe, just maybe, he could stay alive long enough for Jake to reach him. Maybe his friend's sacrifice would not be for nothing. 13 took a deep breath and began to fly like Jake had taught him. Carefully, efficiently, with purpose instead of just passion. The real test was just beginning. 13 forced himself to stop panicking and think like Jake had taught him. He studied the drones surrounding his ship, looking for patterns in their movement. They were fast and smart, but they followed rules. All machines followed rules. The drones stayed a certain distance apart from each other. They attacked in a specific order. They had to avoid hitting each other with their weapons. These rules were meant to make them more effective, but they also created weaknesses. 13 carefully moved his damaged ship toward the smallest gap between two drones. Instead of trying to break through with speed and force, he slipped through slowly and quietly. The drones turned to follow him, but their programming would not let them fire while other drones were in the way. It worked. 13 bought himself precious minutes by staying in the spaces where the drones could not shoot. His fuel gauge was almost empty, and his engines were making terrible noises, but he was still alive. Hang on, 13, Jake's voice crackled over the radio. 2 more minutes. 13 looked at his scanner and saw Jake's ship racing toward him. But Jake was not just flying fast. Even in his hurry to help, he was still thinking ahead. He was approaching from an angle that would put the drones between him and 13. When Jake arrived, he did something that amazed everyone watching from the control tower. Instead of attacking the drones directly, he used his ship as bait. He flew in wide circles around 13, drawing the drones away from his friend. Follow me to the gravity field of the nearest moon, Jake called to 13. We can use it to help us. 13 did not understand the plan, but he trusted Jake completely now. His ship limped after Jake's, using the last of his fuel to keep up. The drones followed both of them, trying to corner them against the moon's surface. But Jake was not flying toward the moon to hide. He was flying toward it to use its gravity as a weapon. At exactly the right moment, he cut his engines and let the moon's gravity pull his ship down. The drones, following too closely, could not stop in time. They crashed into the moon's surface one by one. 13 watched in amazement as Jake used physics instead of weapons to defeat their enemies. It was brilliant and simple at the same time. Now what? 13 asked. His ship was dead in space, out of fuel and barely working. Now we finish the course together, Jake said. Jake moved his ship close to 13's and used his tractor beam to connect them. It was risky because towing another ship would slow Jake down and use extra fuel. But Jake did it anyway. The test rules, 13 protested. You are supposed to finish alone. The rules say we have to reach the finish line, Jake said. They do not say we have to get there separately. Together they limped through the rest of the course. Jake's ship carried both of them, working. twice as hard as it was designed to. They barely had enough fuel to make it. They arrived at the finish line with empty tanks and smoking engines. All the other students had finished the course hours earlier. The control tower had been watching Jake and 13 struggle, broadcasting it to the entire academy. When they finally crossed the finish line, the radio exploded with cheers and congratulations. Back at the space station, Commander Vex was waiting for them in the hangar. His expression was unreadable as they climbed out of their ships. "Cadet Miller," he said to Jake, "you abandoned your test to help another student. You risked your own graduation for someone else's mistake." Jake stood straight and looked the commander in the eye. "Yes, sir. Cadet 13. Commander Vex turned to 13. "Your reckless flying nearly got you killed. You would have failed completely if not for your partner's intervention." 13 felt his skin dim with shame. "Yes, sir." Commander Vex was quiet for a long moment. Then, to everyone's surprise, he smiled. "You both pass," he said. "Sir?" Jake asked, confused. "The Titan run is not just a test of flying skill," Commander Vex explained. "It is a test of judgment, teamwork, and character. Cadet Miller, you showed that you understand the most important rule of space travel: never leave someone behind. Cadet 13, you showed that you can learn from your mistakes and adapt under pressure." 13 felt a strange mix of emotions: relief that he had passed, gratitude toward Jake, but also something else. For the first time, he understood what Jake had been trying to teach him all along. "Commander," 13 said quietly, "I want to ask you something." "Go ahead, Cadet." Jake was not afraid during the rescue, not afraid of failing the test, not afraid of the drones, not afraid of anything. But he was also not stupid about any of it. How is that possible? Commander Vex looked at both young men thoughtfully. "What do you think, Cadet Miller?" Jake thought for a moment before answering. "I was afraid," he said. "I was afraid that 13 would get hurt. I was afraid that I would not reach him in time. I was afraid that my rescue plan would not work." "But you did it anyway," 13 said. "Yes." "Why?" Jake looked at his friend and roommate. "Because being afraid of losing you was worse than being afraid of failing a test." 13 felt something click into place in his mind. He finally understood the difference between his fearlessness and Jake's courage. 13 had never been afraid of anything, so he had never had to choose between fear and action. Jake felt fear all the time, but he chose to act anyway when something important was at stake. "I think I get it now," 13 said slowly. "You are not brave because you are not afraid. You are brave because you are afraid, and you do the right thing anyway." "That is exactly right," Commander Vex said, nodding approvingly. "True courage is not the absence of fear. It is action in spite of fear." That evening, 13 and Jake sat in their room, looking out at the stars. Their test ships were being repaired in the hangar below. Tomorrow they would start their final year at the academy. "Jake," 13 said, "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I am scared," 13 admitted. "For the first time in my life, I am really scared." Jake looked concerned. "Of what?" "Of you," 13 said quietly. "Not scared that you will hurt me. Scared of what you represent. I do not understand." 13 turned to face his friend. "You humans are terrifying, Jake. Not because you are stronger or smarter than other species. You are terrifying because you can feel afraid and still do impossible things. You can be worried about failing and still risk everything for a friend. You can know exactly how dangerous something is and still walk straight into it if you think it is right." Jake was quiet, thinking about this. "The other species in the galaxy think humans are weak because you are new and small and scared of things," 13 continued. "But they are wrong. Humans are the most dangerous species I have ever met, because you have learned to use fear as a tool instead of letting it use you." "Is that bad?" Jake asked. "No," 13 said, his skin glowing softly in the darkness. "It is amazing, and I want to learn how to do it too." From that day forward, Cadet 13 was still trouble. He still did crazy experiments and took wild risks and pushed every boundary he could find. But now he did it with wisdom. He learned to be afraid of the right things, hurting his friends, wasting opportunities, letting fear make his decisions. For him, the instructors were more terrified of him than ever. They had created something new and dangerous, a Zephyrian with human-taught courage, someone who could feel fear and use it to become smarter, stronger, and more determined. The galaxy would never be the same, and somewhere in the back of their minds, every teacher at the academy had the same thought. They had just graduated the two most dangerous cadets in the history of space travel, one who had learned to think before he acted, and one who had learned that being afraid was not the same as being weak. Together, they were going to change everything.